my wife came home to our house in New York after the mini splits had been installed, and we had like 40 feet of line height wrapping around the house, and she was just like, what is that? I did not sign up for that.
You want to show it off to the neighbors, you know?
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Editorial Director Andrew Zellner.
Morning.
Operation Manager for TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
Morning.
And our longtime producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can send your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Well, thanks for being on the show this morning, guys. It's good to see you.
Morning.
Good to be here.
Good to see you too.
So what's been going on, Ian? After a little bit of stabilization, it seemed like building material prices are on the rise again. Is that true?
Yeah. There's only one direction they're going right now, and that's up. I don't really see an end to it, and it's coming at a bad time for us with starting some new homes and large additions. We're going to have to get really creative about purchasing and sourcing materials.
What are prospective clients saying about the current market?
They all want to know if the prices are ever going to go down, which I don't think that they will. And I did a little sort of informal survey of all of our trade partners just to see like what percentage of your job is labor, which once labor goes up, it's unlikely that's going to go down. And then what part of your job is commodity-based materials, your PVCs, copper, wood, etc., and what's not commodity and maybe more selections driven for your projects. And I based this on the infamous $78,000 bathroom remodel that everyone who listens to us will be very familiar with by now. So using the breakdown that I gave on an earlier podcast of the percentages, I came up with about 20% of that job based on my informal survey. 20% of the cost to produce is commodity driven material. So that gives you an idea of cost to produce of $53,000 for that $78,000 bathroom. About 10 grand of that, give or take, is market affected on the commodity base. So when you think about it in those terms, a couple of percent going up or down because of inflation isn't going to make a huge difference. And I think what's thrown a lot of people's radar off is the increase in labor costs over the last 2 years.
How much, Ian?
The increase in labor?
Yeah.
I know that our mechanical trade partners, many of their guys have gotten $10 to $15 an hour raises in pay over the last 2 years, plus the associated costs that go along with.
Is it just scarcity of the labor pool?
Yeah, scarcity.
Wow.
And then, if you're a company that's been in business for a long time and your trucks are well known and you're sending guys to supply houses, there's headhunters for these guys outside
just waiting for the guy to
HVACs.
get out of his truck,
Yep.
right? Like, hey, man.
Yep, just waiting to show the guy a place where they can go and maybe make a couple dollars more.
They take their newest, best-looking truck to the supply house, too, to poach employees. You know it.
Yeah, and a lot of it has been the mix between union and non-union labor in areas like the upper Midwest and Northeast, where there is still a pretty strong commercial labor union market. The easiest place to grab experienced employees is from the residential remodeling market, when you can offer them that $10 or $15 more an hour. Whether that comes with constant year-round work is anybody's guess.
It also comes with a pension, I might add.
It does.
Yeah.
Oftentimes.
Which is also why when I think about doing something myself, my time's essentially worthless, and it's so much more affordable.
Yeah, I spent a big chunk of my night last night replying to comments on the Fine Homebuilding Instagram page. Whoever runs that put up my article again about my $124 square foot cost. So that always gets people commenting, and I like to
Are they
respond to
mean
them.
or are they just curious?
The majority of them are curious. I think the ones that I have interacted with, I think, are pretty shocked that I'm reaching out to interact with them and talk to them about their questions.
Yeah, I am too. No.
That's just the kind of time I have at night sitting on the couch.
Well, I think it's very cool, your generosity with your time and candor with your project.
Yeah.
Andrew, what have you been doing? Have material prices been affecting your builds?
Not really. I'm in the point where I'm buying, a dozen 2x4s at a time. I am, still paying $8-9 a board,
Yeah.
which is significant, but, it's, yeah.
It's on a small scale.
It's on a small scale. Yeah. If I was thinking about, I've got a new garage build in the back of my head, and part of me is like, I should have started it yesterday. And part of me is like, we'll see what happens in 5 years. So.
A couple times you have brought up to me about your interest in Reddit, which is a social media platform, and you have read these Reddit posts. One you told me about regarding a house with, or maybe multiple houses with high water pressure and how that affects things in the house. And another one you mentioned yesterday, I'm not sure what the subject of that was, but also building related. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so I've been a long time, Reddit user, probably going on 15 years now. And it's an interesting kind of like social media platform in that you can tailor what you see and what you want to read about, but still get it in sort of like a newsfeed digest. And so I follow in particular, there's a home improvement subreddit and a homeowner subreddit. And as somebody in the building media world, it's just like full of ideas and problems people are having and questions people are asking. And it's probably a younger demographic too, which I think it's interesting. A lot of sort of first time homeowner questions of like, we just moved in 3 months ago. This thing is happening. Is this expected? What should I do? There's also a lot of kind of contractor stories, and then you get contractors replying in the comments.
What do you think of generally of the conversation? Is it informed? Is it people just spouting off? Are people polite to each other?
I'd say it's still pretty civil. There are some areas of Reddit outside of these subthreads that
Are abusive?
and can lead to the fall of democracy. But, this isn't necessarily one of them. It's interesting. You can sort of like gauge where somebody is in their like home. It's not like a career, but like how long they've been a homeowner based on the questions they ask and the responses they get. And it's like once you reach that sort of like 2 or 3 year homeowning point, the like shock and, thinking this is going to financially ruin me.
You're just numb to it.
Yeah, you get numb to it. You're like, yeah. So it is really interesting. The high water pressure thing it's like when somebody's like diagnosing plumbing problems, it sort of feels like you go with like, well, what are the leaks? Do you have any clogs? What is the material of your pipe? How old is the infrastructure? Are your neighbors having similar issues? And then eventually it's sort of like the gotcha is like, they reply a couple of weeks later and they're like, I had a plumber out and it turns out my water pressure was way too high, sort of thing. And I actually, because this is my first year with the sump pump, Patrick clued me into sort of backup systems, and there's one that's driven by just water pressure. And so I got a water pressure gauge in the mail this weekend and was testing my water pressure at various outlets around the house.
Oh boy, don't keep me in suspense. What are your numbers?
It's like between 40 and 60 psi.
Which seems like a sweet spot, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like it's what I would expect. Having plumbed from the meter kind of to the rest of the house with a home run PEX system. It's
You're just bragging now.
Pretty efficient. Well, it was. It was some of the easiest work I did on my house because I only had a sink, a kitchen and one bathroom at the time, and took a weekend and it was fun. But yeah.
Did you use the crimp rings? Is that your method?
No, I went PEX A and I got the Milwaukee PEX
expanding tool. Yeah, cool. Well, good for you. So, are you going to get one of those pumps?
I think so. It's like. We had our big snow melt over the last week, and my sump pump ran, a dozen times a day for a week, and now like nothing. And we're getting some rain today, so I'm excited to see kind of what that does. But we're like most of the snow's gone now, and I think eventually, but I don't feel the urgency yet. I'm probably waiting for that first catastrophe to be like, I should have done it.
Yeah,
should have done it.
And that's how this stuff always goes, man.
Yeah.
And I don't blame you for being hesitant to spend hundreds of dollars on something you may never use. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have a backup sump pump?
I do not have a sump pump at all.
I bet you feel better about that, right? It's one less thing to worry about.
Yeah. Because my basement has always been dry.
I'm going to knock on wood for you.
Yeah.
Any projects going on at home? Anything to report?
Just some thought experiments, thinking about an outbuilding, but
Where
just
would you put it on your
that's one of the biggest issues is because I have rocky sloped lot and just lots of trees and.
Yeah, sloping might be understating it a little bit.
What would you use an outbuilding for? Or is there something you want?
I have my garage is full.
I play that game, yeah.
Yeah, between lawn tractors, snow throwers, wood chippers, backup generators, like.
You do have a small engine hobby, I gotta say. Why not just get rid of some of that stuff and pay a plow guy, for example?
I don't know. I just, it's just my nature is to do it myself.
Yeah, so I guess it's satisfying, right?
Yeah, it's like I think there's like 2 or 3 people in my neighborhood who mow their own lawns, but you know.
You're among them.
Yep.
I bought these shelf brackets off of Amazon just 2 days ago, and Carol needs a bookshelf, and we're going to put magazines on it, which, as you might imagine, are probably the heaviest thing next to depleted uranium you could come across. But I think they're real pretty. They're like, I think they're water jet cut or plasma cut, and supports under the L-shaped bracket that is shaped like a tree branch, and seems good with her gardening theme life, right? So $60 for 4 of them, which seemed a little more expensive than some other Amazon options, but they're well made and very sturdy. But
what's the commodity price on shelf brackets, Ian?
Depends on what they're made out of. If they're made out of uranium, I think it's probably pretty high.
They're a 1/4-inch steel L-shaped bracket, and then a thinner piece of water jetted branch.
It does bring up the point, though, Andrew. What would those have costed like 3 years ago on any of those?
Do you
websites?
think it affects stuff like that?
It affects the raw material, right?
I bet that's such a small part of the cost, as you were indicating earlier, right?
Yeah. I guess the cost of shipping it here from whatever overseas country that it was made in is probably much higher than any commodity.
I'm surprised you're assuming that's made outside the U.S., Ian.
I am, yeah. Am I correct?
The reason I bring this up, though, is while the bracket is high quality, the instructions are less so. I'll just give you guys a sample here. Installing the brackets, find studs if possible to get the best weight capacity for the shelf. That's not bad so far, all right? Otherwise, use included anchors for brick/dry walls. While holding the bracket against the wall, use a level to ensure the bracket is level and use a pencil to mark the bracket on the wall. Fair enough. All right, using a 1/3 inch drill bit, drill holes. Minimum depth is length of anchor in the wall through the pencil marks. Use hammer to install anchors. Repeat with second bracket. So there you go. You have to leave some of the, you have to figure out the rest on your own, I guess.
With your 1/3 inch drill bit?
I was curious enough to like go figure out what that is. I didn't have time before the show to do it. But yeah, it's a shame that otherwise good products often have bogus instructions. And I think that building products are guilty of this too. And Carol and I were talking about it a little, and we think that manufacturers say, if I really tell you explicitly how to do something, then I'm on the hook for if it doesn't work.
Yeah, we have this iron filtration system at our house because of our well and the iron sulfide, I think, or sulfite that's in the water for filtering it out. And for the life of me, I cannot get the thing set up so that it won't turn on at like 4 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning. And it sounds like, it sounds like the fire department's putting out a fire next door with 10 trucks, the amount of water that it's moving, and the instructions are hopeless.
Of course, this is near and dear to my heart. I bet you would agree, Andrew, and Ian too. Good instructions, good writing are important to convey complex information. And that's definitely a place where manufacturers cut corners, whether it's intentional or not. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm to the point with my water filtration system that I'm going to get one of those plug-in timers and just have the whole thing shut down from like 10 p.m. to
a very reliable low-tech solution, right? Yeah. A clock mechanism.
My wife keeps saying, well, is that going to screw everything up when we go to take a shower in the morning, or is it going to make the boiler not kick on? So now I have to figure that step of it out before I just screw a bunch of other things up with unintended consequence.
Have you dared try calling technical support for help with that?
That's probably my next actual step, is to call their technical support. But when you go on their website, it pretty much tells you, don't call us if you're not a licensed plumber. So
well, you have to lie.
I'm going to have to pose as a licensed plumber.
I can make you an IDE, I think.
All right.
Well, as always, we heard from some of our listeners, and we do appreciate your feedback. Jim says, I know HVAC is one of your hot buttons. When I moved to Asheville into a giant leaky house, I contacted local green building consultants and had an inspection by Matt Van. With his advice, and surprisingly advice from the FHB podcast, I was able to make some significant improvements to the home and basement. Well, that's nice to hear. And Jim talks about these folks, and he is suggesting that they be on Pro Talk, and I would love to talk to them, so I hope we will hear from them.
That's a pretty common question that we get on the podcast.
Yeah.
Of who's out there that's reputable that someone can call to get that type of information. So that's pretty great.
So he's doing a shout out for Van Musser Design, PLLC, founded in 2002. And he also indicated that their services were reasonably priced, which I think is even cooler. So, and he seems to also think that they're into the nerdery of building science, which is also fantastic. So, Ian, you were talking about protecting ADA levels, and we heard from Dan Colbert about his recent project. He says, I took a significant hiatus, fortunately not a hiatal, from listening thanks to the 6,000 other things vying for my attention, but I did just catch the podcast where you talked about ADA levels with Ian and Kylie and mentioned my job. I have a few thoughts. First off, the job was dormering a cape, a big shed in the back, 2 dog houses in the front. It quickly became clear that tearing the roof off would be faster and cheaper and make for a much better job. We tried the EPDM covering before, but there were a couple of problems. There was a chimney in the middle of the house, and we taped the seams with zip. So while we kept probably 90% of the water out, we still had some drywall damage below. On this house, we were getting rid of the chimney, so we would have a nice flat surface. We tore the chimney down by hand to below the second floor deck before my excavation contractor came and demoed the roof. We unfortunately got stuck in one of the windiest couple days in a decade, which made everything more exciting. So of course that's when this always happens, right?
Yeah, and if you follow Dan and some of the other main builders, there was actually a house under construction in South Portland that was blown over.
Oh, I remember that
during
house blowing
that
down.
windstorm.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
They
pretty
didn't have enough
crazy.
sheathing on it. It was pretty clear. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looked like a lot of it wasn't nailed properly, like the sheathing where it lapped onto the floor system. I think Ben Bogey pointed out that there might have been rim joists missing or sheathing that wasn't nailed into a rim joist.
It happens, sadly. Dan goes on, we had a machine drop the rubber roofing on the deck before they left, and we rolled it out and went around the perimeter at the top of the first floor walls to keep it from lifting up. We had a couple of seams to tape, and we did them with contact cement and SA seam tape. It was about 14 degrees, so we used a couple of heat guns to speed things up, but it all worked well. Is that incredible? How can you even work in 14 degrees, Andrew?
You just, keep some hand warmers in your pockets and take breaks when you can't feel stuff anymore.
Oh my
You're
gosh.
thinking that's a warm day.
Yeah, like
The
that's
sun must have been out all day to be 14.
to be on a roof during that would be great.
That's horrible. Well, at least the dark colored roofing, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's not going to help, I'm sure. The house had some waves, so we set new plates and shimmed them level. This had the added benefit of providing scuppers to push any standing water out of. And since we had a structural wedge, we only needed a couple of posts in the interior. We cut out a little of the rubber, prepped where they sat, patched, and then set the posts and ridge. We didn't start framing interior walls until the roof was on, so the rubber remained intact. And in the meantime, I realized the rubber would be perfect for moving out our air barrier from the SA hydro gap over the barn board sheathing on the floor to the underside of the rafters and wall interiors on the second floor, where the drywall and membrane over interior top plates will be the air barrier. So we cut out the rubber on top of the inside, leaving about a foot to fold up. On the outside, we lapped it over the hydro gap and taped. All in all, it worked perfectly. If we ever have a chimney to cover, I think we'll either go over the whole thing and glue to the rest of the EDPM, or maybe run caulk and a band clamp and a wrap of rubber with a foot or two up the chimney and then glue to the base rubber. I think what you do there, Dan, is you use a uncured flashing membrane with EDPM for that kind of transition and put a termination bar, or I guess your clamp would work too because it doesn't have to be forever. He says, I also want to weigh in on Excel. It's pretty much all I use. I've got some fairly complex workbooks that we've developed over the years. I haven't done a great job of linking them like Ian has, but we don't have as much going on, so keeping material prices up to date isn't as critical. Well, Dan, thank you for listening. Thank you for the insights on protecting an attic level. It is a risky project.
Andrew, is the Pretty Good House book that Dan was a big part of with Taunton, is that available widely now?
It's not. It's still in the pre-order phase, but
It
we
is
do have a
still in
link to
pre-order?
pre-order it on taunton.com. And it's spoiler alert, I got to see a final proof, and it's a fantastic book. I'm really excited about it. So, yeah.
You could send that to me when you're done, if you don't mind, Andrew. This comes from another Andrew. He writes, owners of a certain type of combination microwave from the German product company AEG have had a device that no longer works for over 2 weeks. Due to the wrong software update, the microwave now thinks it's a steam oven.
It
quit working.
There's a big Reddit homeowners thread about this particular product.
Do you want to tell folks what's going on, Andrew?
So yeah, they pushed a wrong update, and so now the appliance thinks it's a different appliance and it can't connect to the internet, and so now like a service person has to come out to do a software update, which like defeats the purpose of being able to do remote software updates. And it's an expensive product, and so there were just like a ton of back and forth of like, how smart do our things need to be? Why would we need a smart microwave at all? We used to cook stuff with fire, yeah.
It seems like a premise of a Kurt Vonnegut story, honestly. Doesn't it?
How many
That's
of your
hilarious.
appliances are connected to the Internet of Things, Patrick? I got to think all of yours are at your house
Are you
in
kidding
Greenwich.
me? I hate my setback thermostat, Ian.
My goal is for every time you go to a trade show to have people walk up to you and be like, "Do you really live in Greenwich?" Because of how much I bring it up on the podcast.
Oh, this is so funny. And like you said, it's an expensive product. Of course, your stupid microwave doesn't, it works
Yeah.
whenever, right?
Yeah.
All right, this comes from Mike. He's got a pretty long email, so bear with me, but it's pretty good. So Mike says, I've had a long history of owning and renovating old homes. The place I recently sold in Illinois was exceptionally cool architecturally and literally. It was designed in the prairie style by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, who later went on to design more industrial buildings in Chicago. When he built his own home and the one I owned in the late 40s, they both had two things I never understood nor could figure out how to remediate. I think they were artifacts of his design work with industrial buildings. First, the homes had floors of pre-stressed concrete slabs with a 2-inch float of concrete on top to create a smooth floor and to lock the keys between the slabs. All the neighbors said they would come to my place when the big one was going to drop. The houses also had radiant heat, miles of copper pipe, but rather than embedded in the 2 inches of concrete in the floor, it was in the ceiling. Beneath the bottom of the pre-stressed slab, there was a 1-inch gap and then a plaster ceiling. The copper was placed in the air gap. Now, I'm pretty sure physics was the same in 1949 as it is now, and cold air falls and displaces warmer air, so it rises. There was a 10 to 15 degree difference between the floor and ceiling temperatures during the winter. You might say that the copper in the ceiling on the first floor would transfer some heat through the floor to the second floor, but there was so much mass in the pre-stressed slab and 2 inches of concrete on top that it did nothing. Does anyone still design radiant systems to heat from the ceiling? Needless to say, to remediate this by adding radiant to the floor was not feasible. So to answer your question, Mike, especially in low-load houses, there's engineers who have designed these systems with radiant panels in the ceiling. But it's uncommon, right?
We have two houses that we're working on right now with this exact same system. One of them was also designed by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, which has the same system he describes, and another one in Madison was not. And I believe it has galvanized pipe embedded in the plaster.
How did that work out?
It's still an operating system that we have to try and figure out how to work around.
Very surprising to me. So this seemed like a one-off house, but I'm surprised to hear you have experience with this too.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What time period were the houses you're working on, Ian, are built?
I think they were built around probably the same time period of this house, that like maybe
30s, right?
30s and 20s.
Well, he says the same in 1949, so I'm guessing that's indicating when the house was built. This architect also used steel frame windows everywhere, including the requisite Frank Lloyd Wright wall of windows in the dining room. Beautiful, but there was no thermal break in the frames. The operative windows did not seal all that well. The casements only had a single pane glass, but the big picture windows were thermopane. The wall of windows had 3 5x9 thermopanes mounted between steel columns that held up this beam/header across the whole wall. It was all very nice because it maintained very small frame profiles on the windows in keeping with the prairie aesthetic, but geez, they were cold in the winter. Since the walls were all masonry, 2 bricks thick with a 1-inch air gap stuffed with insulation, there was really no way to air seal anything. I decided to pay the heating bills and enjoy the house. It was in a gorgeous wooded setting. It had no AC for the summer, but I never needed it because of the shade, the prairie overhangs, and the breezes. I suspect it would have been cheaper to push it over and rebuild it than to try to remediate the R5 walls and R0 windows. You know, sometimes you just live in a house because it's beautiful, even if it makes you miserable.
The house like this that was designed by a Wright student has cypress windows with a single pane of glass that are Clearly, they were made by some craftsman, and they're in the French casement push-out style.
Just these designs were ahead of what we had to build with, right? It's,
Yeah. We did actually restore most of the windows, and I think we're only replacing, I think, 6 of them with modern French casement style windows.
I've been to Falling Water in the wintertime, and it is freezing in there. Even with like dozens of people milling around, warming up the place, there is nothing you can do to be warm with those cold masonry walls and steel-framed windows. So Mike goes on. He says, I recently moved into a 90s ranch in a beautiful southwest Wisconsin that was attractive, not because it's a stunning architectural gem, because it's going to be low maintenance. I'd like more of my time in retirement to be spent blacksmithing and furniture making and not home repair. But I can't help myself, and I decided to do some obvious air sealing. As y'all have said, I started in the basement. All the rims and plates were sealed with foam. But be careful what you wish for. Suddenly my radon measurements went up to around 12, so I put in a remediation system to vent that. But that got me down to about 8. As I was diagnosing next steps, it struck me that all the ducts were not sealed, so that each time the system kicked in, I suspect there was negative pressure being created by the intakes. I suppose there was positive pressure from the supply ducts too. In any case, all the ducts were very accessible, so I sealed them up and added insulation to the supply side. Huge difference in airflow upstairs. Also, the furnace is a high-efficiency furnace that gets combustion air from the basement, which I just had sealed up, so it was sucking harder for air. The hot water heater was also a high-efficiency unit, so it was doing the same thing, but it was compounding the problem with a pretty powerful fan pulling air from basement to drive the exhaust flow out of the house. Neither the furnace nor the fan on the hot water heater look like they can be retrofitted to draw air from outside. Is there some solution I don't know about to do this? Also, would it be easy to just seal the ducts when they are installed? Why is that not a code requirement? So it is now. If they run in unconditioned spaces, I don't know. I don't think you have to do it if they run in conditioned space because it matters less. But if you want the air to go where it's supposed to, you have to seal them to get delivery.
Do you have a solution for a furnace or water heater like that to pull its air from the outside when it's not originally designed for it?
You need a supply combustion appliance, or you need something that's electric. I mean, the answer is pretty simple. I'm sorry to say. It's not inexpensive, but it's pretty simple. There are these things that you can retrofit in some cases, but their applications are limited. It's called a fan in a can, and they're made by Field Controls. Isn't that fun? So you put this in like a combustion air intake, and what it does is pressurize the combustion air and force it into the burner. But it's not inexpensive. It's probably less than a whole new appliance, but and there are limitations on when you can use it. So you'll want to dig into that, Mike, and see if you can use it. But what do you guys think? Is that an answer?
I think so. You're going to be replacing things that are like still functioning, which is always a bummer. But there's probably some efficiency gains too at the same time that might offset it. I don't know if it's original to the mid '90s ranch. You're maybe about that time anyway.
I think what he's talking about, he says the hot water heater is high efficiency, so it has a power-assisted draft, right? It's got a fan that pushes out the flue gases, but it doesn't have a combustion air intake. So it's, to a degree, putting the space under a negative pressure, which he says his furnace is also doing, because it doesn't have combustion air, too.
I wonder if he could build a sealed mechanical room around the 2 units and then vent that mechanical room to the outside. He'd have a pretty big energy penalty in the winter, but I wonder if that would work as a low-tech DIY solution.
Jeff, you were nodding your head.
That was my thought as well. Just make an insulated room that draws outside air.
And you'd have to put a door on it, right? And with a weather stripping, you're making this what amounts to outside the conditioned space, right? That's the goal.
Yeah. I think your comment of just get a new furnace and water heater is probably more sensible than that.
It's gonna. I'm not sure all listeners are going to think it makes sense to replace your functioning combustion appliances, but this is a risk
You would
if it's
think
not
if it's
venting correctly.
if it's a 90s ranch, it's probably been replaced already, and it's
At the end of its lifespan, right?
Yeah. The fact that he refers to it as a high efficiency appliance makes me think it has been replaced at some point.
I think, and fairly so, a lot of folks equate high efficiency with non-atmospherically vented. Power-assisted appliances can be mid-efficiency, right? They can be 80-some or higher efficiency than the 80% efficiency of a natural draft combustion appliance. We'll be back with more right after this. Finishing your basement is the fastest and least expensive way to add living space and value to your home. And to do it right, you'll need basement doors and egress window wells. Bilco basement doors and window wells add light, ventilation, and code-compliant emergency egress to lower-level living areas, making them as warm, safe, and comfortable as any room in the home. Basement doors are available with a factory-applied powder coat paint and finish in a number of standard colors to complement any home. To learn how to get more out of your basement with Bilco products, visit bilco.com. If you run a home service business like painting, contracting, lawn care, or cleaning, your to-do list is endless. From hiring staff to mountains of paperwork, not to mention doing the actual work that pays the bills. Jobber is a mobile and online app that helps you organize your business and look professional. With Jobber, you can quote jobs, schedule your crew, invoice, and get paid all in one place. Try it free today at getjobber.com/finehomebuilding. Here's Seth. Hello, podcast. I've been approached by a homeowner with a SIP timber frame home built in the 90s, which has black water dripping down from the beams in the late winter of every year. My thought is that the SIP seams over the beams were not properly sealed, and so warm, moist air freezes on the underside of the felt paper and then thaws out and drips back into the house in the spring. I propose that we pull the metal roofing off, apply peel and stick underlayment to the entire roof, and then install a new roof. This is not a cheap fix, so I'm looking for a second opinion on whether or not I have properly assessed this problem and if my solution will work. Thank you, Seth, Wintergreen Remodeling. This is a problem we've heard about before, right?
Yeah.
You guys are nodding. Who wants to go first?
Thanks to this podcast, I abandoned my thinking about cladding my house in SIPs from stuff that you guys had talked about years ago with issues with SIPs, especially in a humid heating and air conditioning climate like I'm in. But it was something that I was looking at for a while. There's a lot of places that you can source them inexpensively, and they seem like a great way to tip up a building. But if you don't get the seal and the waterproofing and flashing details right on them, they can really be this type of a problem.
And the fix isn't cheap. You're replacing an entire side of your house,
And if it gets sufficiently bad, I mean, the SIP is the load-bearing component of a SIP house. Some of them are wrapped around timber frames, but not all of them. And if that OSB or the plywood is sufficiently rotted, it's a structural problem, not just an envelope problem.
Luckily, if this is a true timber frame that is just wrapped in SIPs, then Seth actually has something to work with as opposed to, like you said, having to replace the entire side of your house or a large section of your roof structure.
I think Seth is definitely on the right track, but I don't think sealing it from the outside, unless you can inject foam and assure that it gets all the way to the bottom, is going to do the job. Because if the interior air can get even up to the sealed sheathing, it's still going to condense because it's going to be cold, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe you could add exterior insulation on top of the SIP panel, which sounds bizarre and but you need to raise the temperature of that so it's not a condensing surface. Mm.
If you pull the metal roofing off, is that something you can reuse?
If it's standing seam, Andy Grace says absolutely not. If it's screw down, sure, but if the tape if the seams on the screw-down panels have butyl tape, boy, I don't know.
Okay.
I guess it depends is the short answer.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if this particular metal roof was installed with the butyl tape
sure.
Overlaps, if it is getting that much water potentially through the metal roof. Because I've seen them get installed without the tape.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty common practice on a significant pitch, right?
Yeah.
Some panels have a rib profile that makes them prevent self-siphoning. So capillarity, if the panels on the edges where they overlap fit too tightly, the water can actually be drawn up in that very small space through capillary action. So oftentimes there's a secondary rib on top of the bigger rib that breaks that capillary action to prevent that. And I don't think you have to tape those at all, ever, except on the lowest slopes. Anyway, what do you guys think? Seth has got a problem here.
It's not a cheap fix, but it sounds like the cheapest fix.
If there's any way to get that foam all the way down to the fill the seam, or at least to get a few inches in there to raise the temperature, that's gonna be key to the success of this fix.
You wouldn't try to do anything on the interior as far as moisture mitigation?
That would be my preferred, Ian. If you can fix it from the inside, I would say do that. It might be just a matter of pulling down the drywall tape and shooting foam in there, or taping it and then fixing it. Oftentimes, there might be faux beams, or maybe they didn't even tape the seam on top of the timber frame where the panels meet, right? I mean, I don't know how you fix that.
Yeah.
From the underside.
That would be difficult, though. The way I'm envisioning it with the seams, landing at the ridge on top of a beam, I think you're right. That would be a really tough detail to get right, but you're not creating a true seal from the beam to the sip either to mitigate that moisture rising up.
Maybe if you could caulk where it meets the timber frame meets the panel, you could air seal it that way. I'm betting no one ever did. That wouldn't seem to be, in most people's thinking, wouldn't seem to be necessary, right?
Right.
Or even desirable, because now all of a sudden you got this caulk edge on your beautiful timber frame.
Yep.
Jeff has a question that he posted on GBA that is sparked my curiosity. He says, I'm looking for an economical way to cover two mini split line sets, one around 17 feet and the other around 14 feet long. My line sets need to be at least 4 inches wide to cover them. Here are the options I've considered. One, a commercial product which starts at around $80 per cover kit, but might not be quite long enough for my longer line set. $160 to cover two is pricey by my standards. I could use a so-called 5-inch vinyl K-type gutter, which would cost around $65 for both line sets with elbows, unions, and caps. I'm not sure it would be large enough, though, as the piece I have is only around 3 inches wide and most of its interior. There's a wider type of gutter available around an hour away, but it's not worth the trip. Someone posted on another forum that he wrapped his line sets in foam pipe insulation and then covered it with RV wheel cover material. People whose line sets are more slender have done well using 2x3 gutter downspouts. Some have suggested forming a cover from aluminum coil stock, but I don't have a brake, and getting a shop to do it would probably cost more than the commercial cover. I haven't seen anyone else propose this, but solid 4-inch flex drain that runs about $11 to $12 a foot would provide ample room, join easily, and wouldn't need any elbows. Caps for the top ends run around $6. It's black and probably not meant to withstand years of UV exposure, so it would need to be covered with paint that sticks to polypropylene, which this runs around $7. It would have to be split open to go around the line set, but could be reclosed with zip ties or something similar. Any comments or ideas, suggestions for a better economical solution would be appreciated. Wow, what do you guys think? These things are horrible looking, generally speaking, right? We're all nodding.
We typically cover them in a downspout when we have to do them. That's our go-to.
Does it fit in there readily?
Usually, but I think we have to go up one size.
To 4x6 downspout instead of 2x3? Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems like the best option, unless you can make some kind of cool pilaster or whatever to hide it, but it would have to match the architecture of your house.
Right.
Or not. Anyone vote for the plastic drain tile with zip ties?
I don't know about that.
I don't know
That
about
feels
that.
like it looks too economical.
Yeah. It almost looks more economical than just leaving the line set unhidden as it runs down your house.
I think this is an opportunity for a smart, forward-thinking company to make one of these things that isn't just god-awful hideous, right?
It probably
And there's going to be more and more of these.
$320 instead
What's
of
that?
it would probably cost $320 instead of his $160 cap.
I think there's, if you show like a good one to a client and an ugly one to a client, I think they would see the light, and especially here in Greenwich.
Yep. You have to be careful about that thing. You don't want the neighbors talking about you, especially if you start mowing your own lawn like Jeff.
Is everything okay, Jeff? That's what you. I don't know. I think that the gutter downspout is the best solution I have, but I welcome suggestions from our amazing listeners for something that looks
Anytime
better.
we talk about something like this, I just remember the day that my wife came home to our house in New York after the mini splits had been installed, and we had like 40 feet of line height wrapping around the house, and she was just like, "What is that? I did not sign up for that."
You want to show it off to the neighbors, like.
Look at our high efficiency heating and cooling, everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
It's a status symbol.
Well, so how did you hide them? You put them in the walls, right? You put refrigeration line set in the wall before you closed them up.
Yeah,
That's the best solution.
Half the guys that worked with us from Mitsubishi were really skeptical of that, and then half of them were like, "Of course, that's what you would do." It's
What do
new
you mean they were
construction."
skeptical?
They just don't like the fact that you're not going to be able to get to it should you ever have a failure. But
Oh, yeah, clearly the mechanics
Right.
Perspective, right? Yeah.
right. But I gave them the Patrick quote of drywall's cheap. You just cut the drywall out, do your work, and put it back.
So here's another question I have, actually two. All right, so you put the refrigeration lines in the wall, you insulate them, but there's no way it is perfectly sealed where it comes into the stud cavity. What prevents condensation from happening at some point along that line set?
That's
You're
a good
like,
question. Yeah.
I mean, and the other question I have is, what do you do with the condensate lines? Like, where do they discharge on your house? They
So
just come out the wall?
Two of the condensate lines actually run down to our bathroom in the basement, and they drain into a hub drain in our sink, which my plumber was also skeptical that was going to work, but
For the same reason, he's worried about fixing this later?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it hasn't flooded the bathroom yet, and then the other mini split, which is in my office in the basement, just runs directly straight through the exterior wall that it's mounted to. So I did have another penetration to hit with zip tape.
I mean, I'm not worried about that at all with poured concrete like you have, right? But if you had a block wall, which is very vapor open, it could be a source of interior moisture, I'm guessing, unless you did a good job detailing that, right?
Yep.
And it would be
agree.
tough to detail correctly in a retrofit, which we're expecting. We're going to have lots of mini splits retrofit in houses. So.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. There's an opportunity out there for a good solution.
You know, the condensate with refrigeration, heating and cooling is a problem with condensate pumps too. So when you don't have a way to gravity drain the condensate, you use this little pump, and they're notorious for stopping work. You know, they quit working, and then the thing overflows, and your HVAC system doesn't know that the condensate pump is not working unless you have some kind of special sensor in there. And then it could happen a long time, enough to make your drywall ceiling come down in a section, or soak your insulation in your attic, or, make a mess in the basement, or flood your bathroom, Ian, right?
Yeah. And now you've got me worried about it bringing moisture into that wall space. So I'm gonna have to take my moisture meter and get a moisture reading of the drywall right underneath my mini splits now.
I can't wait to hear what that is, right? This comes from Gadge in the FHB forum. We'd like to have our electric outlets installed on the baseboard rather than 18 inches up from the floor. We're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Can anyone tell me if this is the code? Having them up higher looks unsightly to me. Any other solutions? I don't really want them in the floor. I don't think you can do even without having it permanently covered, right? There's weird floor outlet requirements.
I think it's a great idea to put them in the baseboard. I've always liked that look whenever I've had to do that on remodels or new houses. And somebody posted all of the Philadelphia electrical code stuff on the thread on GBA, and it's clearly okay. And I think even Andy Engel made some comment on there about it being totally fine and something they do often as well.
I recall a line of raceway that you could run your line voltage in to do this. And I've seen it in high-performance homes that don't want to compromise the air barrier running and putting devices in the walls, right?
Yep. Having them in the baseboard reminds me of this one electrician that I used to work with on commercial projects who was notorious for not cleaning up and leaving it for our apprentices. And he once told me that it's in their union contract that once the garbage is below the lowest receptacle on the wall, it's no longer their problem. So it makes me wish that we would have had more baseboard outlets, because I could have at least got them with, you got to skim the top of your garbage pile off.
I found it interesting that like the height of the outlet, it's like you just sort of visually want them all at the same height, and like there's no prescribed height, and it's like it's just the height of the electrician's hammer is like where they choose.
It's pretty arbitrary. Yeah. I put mine really high in the barn in a lot of places because, I'm plugging in the shop vac, I'm plugging in power tools, or plugging in the iron, or the light table, or, all this stuff. And it's not like it's a lamp, you plug it in once and then leave it there. So I like them higher.
I love a workbench height outlet. Yeah. It's one of life's luxuries,
Agreed. I'm a huge...
With the floor outlets, it is the floor outlet boxes and the covers for them can get pretty expensive, and they can sort of cause a trip hazard if you decide to rearrange your house and now suddenly you have this floor outlet in the middle of nowhere in the floor.
I was thinking too, like furniture, if you have the receptacle at the level where the leg is, it seems like you could smash a receptacle with a piece of furniture moving it, right? Mm-hmm. I learned that the hard way with my mechanic's tool chest when it was plugged in and I pulled it, and the thing weighs hundreds of pounds, so you don't notice when it's plugged into the wall, and it broke the device because it didn't release. I was like, boy, this thing is really heavy. So, Andrew, we're heading to JLC Live, and that will have happened by the time this airs, but have you been before?
This will be my first time at JLC Live. I'm excited about it. It feels like a show where you can see the whole thing in like a day and like engage with the vendors and the folks there a little bit more. Also excited to attend the Festool event this week too. I'm a Festool fanboy and have been since I tried one of their sanders and dust extractors, and it was like I could feel my hand and there wasn't any dust hanging in the air. So
I was doing a lot of sanding this weekend, and I was having my hands ringing after. And you tell me that would go away if I spent $600 on a sander.
Probably not if you spend an entire weekend sanding, but it's definitely it's like a noticeable improvement. Yeah.
Wow. So what's your favorite tool of theirs?
I got like one I bought a Domino Joiner. It was a big, check to write, but
Can you tell folks what that is who may not be familiar with that?
a Domino Joiner basically lets you make, loose mortise and tenon joints in kind of anything. And so, like, it basically lets you break all of your woodworking conventions about, like, what should join what to what, because it just creates a super solid joint that's held together with glue. And
Fast, accurate.
it's fast, accurate, repeatable. And so, like, all my kitchen cabinets I made, the rails and stiles are just joined with Domino joints.
I was working with a Fine Homebuilding contributor who's making face frames with a Domino too, because it's more reliably flush than pocket screws.
Yeah.
It also costs a bit of coin, right?
Did you get the XL or the regular one, Andrew?
Just the regular one. The XL seemed like overkill for building furniture.
It's
So
overkill,
the
but
regular
it's so
one is
great.
only 1,500, right?
Yeah.
No, I think the XL is I splurged on one for my birthday present to myself. I think it was like just under 1,800 by the time I was done.
Can you use the smaller dominoes with the bigger tool, Ian?
You can, because there's a company of machinists that make all of these aftermarket pieces that you can bolt onto the XL to use the smaller dominoes as well.
So that tells me that the smaller one is completely obsolete. You're going to need to buy the new one, Andrew, the bigger one.
Well, so I thought about that, and it's like the XL is such a larger machine
It is.
than the 500 that it's like using the XL to make like a 4mm mortise seems crazy. But
It is the sledgehammer to kill a fly,
Right.
without a doubt, when you're using it at that face frame type scale.
It is an amazing tool. I will concede. I do not have one, but it is. I've seen it used numerous times, and I borrowed one from Matt Kenny to do some stuff. It is an amazing tool. Super, super strong joint. Yeah.
You guys have any other good plans while you're in Providence?
just dinner. Because we're like a remote team, a lot of folks haven't like spent a bunch of time together in person. So that's one of the big things I'm looking forward to is everyone who's there on Friday at dinner time from our team. We're gonna get together and be friendly, not on a Zoom screen. So it'll be fantastic.
My favorite part of the JLC Live experience is the reminder that there are very good, passionate builders and remodelers out there who are trying to do a good job for their clients, who are trying to make a living and are bettering themselves by shelling out their own cash to go and do better. And I think that is super cool. And I hope they learn a lot and are better builders because of it.
It's the same thing with the Fine Homebuilding Summit, too.
It's not easy work, and I greatly respect anyone who takes their own time, spends their own money to spend more time doing it. It's very cool. What do you got planned for the weekend, Ian? I guess you're not going to JLC Live this week.
I am not, but the reason I'm not is we are leaving in about a week to go to Belize for a week, which will be my first time out of the country. And I like to say that yeah.
Wow. And
I like to say that I agreed to this trip in a moment of COVID-induced weakness over Christmas. It's my sister-in-law's 40th birthday, and she's a big world traveler, and planned for anybody who knew her to go to Belize, and my wife really wanted to go, and I was like, screw it, I'll go with you. And now it's like we're leaving in a week, and I'm like, wow, I'm leaving in a week to go out of the country, to go somewhere where it's warm when I don't like warm weather.
Does it make you nervous to leave work? Are you going to be able to leave that here?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see how it works. Oddly enough, my boss is going to Costa Rica this week, and I think our trips overlap by 2 days, where we're both gone from work and in Central America.
Well, you better enjoy those 2 days, because that might be the only rest you get.
Yeah, it might be. He told me to bring all my work stuff and computer and everything, and that he would be doing the same. So
That's awful.
Yeah.
So have you gone diving? Are you going to go diving? That's what you do in Belize, right?
I will be under an umbrella drinking rum and looking at the water.
I hope you have a great time.
I'd swim like a brick.
Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you guys today. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Thanks to Ian, Andrew, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building.